If you've ever been curious about the story of the collapse of the Inca Empire, then Cajamarca, Peru is one of the most important parts of that story. This small, seemingly insignificant Peruvian city is where the last sovereign emperor of the Inca Empire was captured and executed by the conquistadors of the Spanish Empire a long time ago. I traveled to Cajamarca to reminisce and try to visualize this history, but it appeared as though it had been completely washed away by the passage of time. Instead, what I discovered were even older, more ancient secrets that predated the Inca Empire by thousands of years.
Before the Incas, like even more than 600 years before the Inca Empire.
Join me on this adventure as I share snippets of the fall of the Inca Empire, showcase the beautiful colonial cityscapes of Cajamarca, and delve deep into even more ancient ruins of humanity that you've never seen before. Upon landing in Cajamarca and taking a taxi into town, you are immediately struck by a semblance of the old world, with red-tiled rooftops that are almost Romanesque in style. After checking in, I hop into the nearest vegan restaurant to try something deliciously ancient from the Andes of Peru, pachamanca a la olla.
Welcome to the Plaza de Armas de Cajamarca, the Plaza of Weapons of Cajamarca. So, the Plaza de Armas de Cajamarca is where Francisco Pizarro in 1532 captured the last free king of the Inca Empire, Atahualpa, and he held this king as a hostage for quite some time before ultimately killing him because Francisco Pizarro thought that Atahualpa was biding time to essentially send his army and free himself. Ahora mismo nos vamos a subir por allá, arriba. We're gonna go climb up there.
Then it was time to climb to the viewpoint of Santa Apolonia. Over 3,200 years ago, the Chavin peoples built platforms and underground tombs for their most important individuals. Then, 1,300 years ago, the people of Cajamarca began to worship rain, lightning, and the stars, even building a temple dedicated to the moon goddess Mama Quilla. Once the Spanish conquistadors arrived, the entire history was erased and this ancient culture was destroyed.
We have arrived. Welcome.
The small chapel near the top is dedicated to the Virgin of Fatima, also known as the Apparition of Mary in Portugal, in 1917. The chapel itself was built in 1957 atop ancient indigenous ruins.
So just to keep in mind, Cajamarca was not the center of the Inca Empire. It was actually divided up amongst various brothers or family members in the empire. And ultimately, the king from here, the Capac, Atahualpa, was the victorious one ultimately. But you also have the city of Cusco, which is also one of the historic centers of the Inca Empire. But nonetheless, welcome to one of the centers of the Inca Empire.
The Inca Empire was divided into 4 regions called suyus. There was a northern, a southern, eastern, and western suyu. The 4 corners of these suyus met at the center of the empire, Cusco. Every region was captured through vicious, unending conquests long before the arrival of the Spanish. From the top, the first thing that catches your attention about modern-day Cajamarca is the vast expanse of red-tiled roofs that spread out below. These traditional roofs give the city a rustic, old-world Roman feel. The city is nestled in a valley, so when you look around, you can see the rolling, hazy Andes Mountains enveloping the city. The green of the mountains provides a sharp contrast to the orange tones of the city's roofs and buildings. Plaza de Armas, with its gardens and fountains, serves as a central hub for the city and is a gathering place for locals and tourists. The plaza is surrounded by a towering cathedral and colonial architecture. As your eyes wander, church bell towers pierce the sky as a reminder of the Spanish conquest.
Ultimately, the reason that Francisco Pizarro, the Spanish conquistador, was able to capture Atahualpa and hold him hostage until they essentially killed him is that Atahualpa went to war with his brothers for succession. He wanted to become the new king, so he had to go to war with his brothers in Cusco and other various cities in the Inca Empire. And he came back victorious. He essentially won the conflicts against his brothers. And as he was coming back, he wanted to celebrate. But at the same time, Francisco Pizarro heard about this, and he decided to tell Atahualpa that, hey, I'm actually here to give my allegiance to you. I'm actually here to help you out with your army. I'll do whatever it takes. Just maybe include me into your parties. And ultimately, Atahualpa was holding a party, and Francisco Pizarro only had a few soldiers. So what happened was they invited him to the square here in Cajamarca, in the Plaza de Armas, and Francisco Pizarro was hiding while Atahualpa came in with only his servants with no weapons. And then ultimately, when the time was right, Francisco Pizarro sent out his military, and they killed every servant that was in the square, and they completely massacred everyone. And they ultimately captured Atahualpa and held him hostage.
The Inca emperor promised the Spanish endless amounts of gold in exchange for his release and leaving his empire. And thus, from all around the Inca Empire, thousands of pieces of gold were brought in. But one day, the Spanish suspected that the emperor was slowly trying to amass his army. As a result, the Spanish baptized him and then strangled him, thus bringing an end to the Inca reign in South America. This was followed by an extensive purge of indigenous culture, the Christianization of the continent, and hundreds of last stands by the remaining free men and women of their native lands.
So this place sells souvenirs. There's a very interesting thing at the very back.
Back in town, I signed up for whatever tour was available and hopped onto the tour bus to head out of town into the fields of Cajamarca.
So welcome to a tour. Right now we're at a ranch that produces cheese.
Cajamarca is known for its ranches with family-owned cheese production. The ranches produce cheeses such as Parmesan, mozzarella, and cheddar from unpasteurized milk, giving them a unique flavor and texture. Cheese in Cajamarca is as homemade as you can possibly get if you love eating cheese. The next stop was the Jardín de Hortensias, or the Garden of Hydrangeas in English. Hydrangeas are flowering shrubs that are native to the Americas and Asia. They have large, extravagant flower heads in blues, pinks, whites, or purples, depending on the acidity of the soil. The garden itself boasts over 100 varieties of flowers, including roses, orchids, and lilies from all over the world, including Japan.
So this entire garden apparently is with Japanese plants.
While I'm not particularly into flowers, this garden was a beautiful sight to behold with such novel and exotic species of plant life.
I will admit this is a very beautiful garden. It's called the Garden of the Hortensias. Very beautiful. Flowers from all over the world, from Japan, from Peru, from other places. So if you get a chance, I recommend it.
And then it was time to continue through the farmlands of Cajamarca to our next destination.
So now welcome to the Ventanillas de Otuzco. So this was the cemeteries of the pre-Incas between 450 after Christ until 900 after Christ. So this is where after about 7 years or so, once you died, your body would eventually decay, but then your bones would remain, and then they would try to bury your bones inside these tunnels, and then they would essentially block it off. Now, some of them are much deeper than others simply because of wear and tear over time. But for the most part, this was used as a strictly human cemetery. Now, there weren't any jewels or anything of value discovered. Maybe it was stolen, but for the most part, even chemical residue was never found in these Ventanillas de Otuzco. They're called ventanillas, which means like windows, but they're not actually windows. They just look like it, represented. But nonetheless, it's a cemetery that existed pre-Incas, and we're talking about even more than 600 years before the Inca Empire.
Our last stop was the suspension bridge of Otuzco. This was the least exciting part of the tour because the river below looked like a calm little stream during this season. The two sides of the bridge seemed to simply connect large empty fields with an occasional dwelling here and there. Probably during the wet season and many centuries ago, this bridge was vital for agriculture, but for now, it was incredibly tranquil and an unassuming tourist spot.
So the tour has ended. I won't say that it was the most interesting tour that I've ever been on. All the little farms and stuff, it was very interesting to see. So right now I'm going to go back to my hotel and look for a restaurant.
The plaza was filled with locals hanging out, listening to orchestral music, and strangely enough, taking photos with Christmas trees and a giant statue of Santa Claus. This was ironic since Christmas and Santa Claus were concepts brought over by European conquerors. Moreover, it was an idea derived from pagan Germanic tribes and ultimately transformed by American capitalism into what we see today. I'm sure this would have looked completely alien over 600 years ago. It was time to find food, but the nearest vegan restaurant was several kilometers away. So, cell phone in hand, and with a bit of confidence, I ventured out solo beyond the plaza into the busy market streets of Cajamarca at nighttime. The sidewalks were far too narrow for pedestrians, so at times I had to walk alongside the busy traffic, which also only had a few inches of leeway. After all, this city wasn't designed for traffic, parking, or locals flooding the streets for the Christmas shopping season.
Luckily, I've been told that Cajamarca is one of the more safer cities here in Peru, so I'm not afraid to encounter any situations, dangerous situations.
Each city's street featured an overabundance of shoes, clothing, and various household wares. At major intersections, you could find street food being cooked for salivating locals. Every so often, you encounter Peruvians dressed in traditional clothing, similar to what they wore long before the entire empire was transformed into modernity. After a good 30-minute walk, I arrived at the absolutely delicious restaurant El Eden, far away from the plaza. Then another 30-minute walk back towards the main plaza, and then back to the viewpoint of Santa Apolonia to burn those calories and enjoy the cityscape of Cajamarca at night. Only later on would I discover that Cajamarca looks very similar to the Peruvian cities of Ayacucho and Cusco, all historically rich indigenous and colonial cities tucked away among the Andean hills and mountains.
Anyways, this concludes my day. I went to go eat at a vegan place, very nice, great food. Then I climbed back up to the top of Cajamarca, and now time to go and relax. Tomorrow's another adventure, and see you tomorrow.
Day 2 in Cajamarca would take us into the hills and canyons that were populated by the locals thousands of years before even the Inca civilization. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in part 2 of our Cajamarca adventure. Cheers and salud.